Hi everyone, welcome to our People panel. We have a different setup today than our usual session, so we do still encourage you to engage in the session by sending your questions in the comment section. For this month, it's Black History Month, and our Diversity, Inclusion, Belonging Committee has joined forces with our People panel to host a panel discussion on Black history. For those who haven't watched these sessions before, I'm Emma. I play an active part in the DIB committee, and with me today is Jaina.
Hi all, I'm Jaina and I'm founder of the Diversity, Inclusion and Belonging Committee. Our committee consists of 6 people and together we're building to work together to build an ever more inclusive culture here at Reach. We encourage our staff and support one another to share their stories and experiences. So far for Black History Month, we put on Black Film Marathon through the Facebook page. We've also launched a Black History Month playlist on Spotify to everyone news while they're going through their working day remotely. And next week we have our second book club planned, which I'm super excited about. I hope you're all as hooked as me on Queenie, which will be the book we're discussing next Friday. But today I'm really pleased to welcome our 5 great panellists from across the business.
And before we introduce them, we wanted to make everyone aware of what the Black History Month's mission statement is. It's dig deeper, look closer, and think bigger. And today, talking about Black history, we invite Mary, Tracy, Ed, Rami, and Alice to discuss Black history education, addressing these conversations with different generations and talking about why it's important for everyone to educate themselves.
So without further ado, I'm going to hand over to the panellists themselves. Panellists, if you can just introduce yourself and firstly just tell us how you're feeling about being on the panel today. So I'm going to go to Tracy first.
Good afternoon, everyone. So my name's Tracy. I've been in the business 20 years this year. So I started in June 2000. I'm based in Bristol, quite a diverse city out in the world, just not diverse within Reach. So I manage the telesales hub and I'll be looking after moving forward when the pandemic is finally over. I'll be looking after the Cardiff hub, which I'm doing virtually at the moment. So I've got a team of 12 that I currently manage. How do I feel about being on the panel? Mixed feelings really, because I'm probably a little bit older than everybody else on the panel. So Black History Month for me didn't really kick in until I was sort of in my mid-20s. So I'm really interested to get everybody's thoughts, how they interact with their children. So yeah, really excited about being on the panel today. Thank you.
We'll go over to Rami.
Hi, my name's Rami Mwamba. I'm a journalist at the Manchester Evening News. My role is a Facebook community reporter for the Evening News, and matches are Salford and the Black and ethnic minority communities of Manchester as well. I feel a little bit honoured and privileged to be on the panel today. I feel sort of proud to be recognised as, to be recognised to be on the panel, and very much like Tracy, I'm very excited to hear what everybody else on the panel has to say about diversity, inclusion, education, and Black history as well. So yeah.
Go over to Ed.
Hello everyone, I'm Ed Walker. I'm Audience and Content Director for our Regionals division, and I'm also Editor-in-Chief of In Your Area, which is our hyperlocal platform across the country. How am I feeling about being on the panel? A bit nervous, to be honest, a bit of a fraud. I will be as honest as I can be. I'm not going to profess to be any kind of Black history expert, so I'm here to learn as much as anything, and I just felt it was important for someone who's senior and white to come on one of these panels, because we do a lot of great things, but I often see it's certain individuals who are appearing in these, and I felt I would show my support and answer questions and learn a lot, hopefully.
Hi, my name's Alice. I work for the Manchester Evening News. I'm a lifestyle writer, and I feel pretty good to be on the panel today, especially because we can speak about race in a corporate setting, because I think it's important, and I don't think a lot of people have the opportunity to speak so openly and listen to others' opinion on it, especially in work. So I think it's a really good opportunity for us to do it, and I'm looking forward to hearing what everyone has to say.
Hi, I'm Mary. I'm a social media editor at Reach. I'm based in the London office, Canary Wharf. I'm excited to be on this panel. I've had, lots of honest and frank conversations with Jim himself and other members of the company, and looking forward to seeing what everyone thinks about Black History Month. There's so much going on with history, current and present as well, current and past, and I think everyone should educate themselves and find out why, we should be educating ourselves, our kids and our fellow colleagues and family about what is going on.
Thank you. Tracy, you actually briefly mentioned a little bit more about when Black History Month, you became aware of it and at what point in your life. Could you talk about what Black History Month means to you?
So by the time I think Black History Month, because it started in sort of the late 80s, early 90s, I was already in work. So for me, it meant it wasn't something that we spoke about as children in my house, but my family were very into Black history anyway. So my parents came from the Caribbean, and it was quite important that we talked about Black people. We had Black books. I was fortunate back then, I had a Black doll, which many of my friends back in the 70s didn't have. So by the time Black History Month was launched and it was well underway, I was quite aware of where I come from, what was expected of me, how I should act, out in the world. So in Bristol, we used to do, this pandemic has caused major problems. We used to have lots of events. I'd go to drama groups. I'd go to music shows. Obviously that's all stopped, but it was a good month for me because it was when we showcased what we could do as Black people. Obviously we're Black all year round, not just in October, but it was lots of things going on. So I enjoyed October. It was always a good time for me. So yeah, that's what it means.
Thanks, Tracy.
It's okay.
Is there anyone else who'd like to answer this question on what Black history means to you?
Yeah, I would like to go ahead if that's okay. Black History Month, it's a hard one because I think it's a great concept in terms of, having Black History Month to educate people, even Black people themselves, in terms of what's going on in Black History Month, in terms of British history, and not just American history, British history. And I think that should extend to the school curriculum. However, I believe that Black History Month should be every day of the year. It shouldn't be just 1 month, because some people will be like, well, I've done my Black History Month now. I can sit back now and chill out for the rest of the 11 months and not do anything. Well, no, it should be an everyday process that you should educate yourselves on what is going on, because if you know yourself as a person and you can understand where people from ethnic minorities are coming from, that can shape your values and your biases and how you approach different situations and people and community and life and in workplace. And if you don't educate yourself, and that's where the racism comes from, discrimination, unconscious biasness, and just a lot of stuff, microaggressions that Black people have to deal with on a daily basis, the ignorance about people who are non-Black saying, oh, racism doesn't exist, oh, give me an example, and not understanding that when Black people do have to always explain where racism is coming from or situations, it's traumatic to relive that experience day in, day out. So Black history should be a daily basis. And it should get to the point where in schools, history should be just history. So Mary Seacole to Nightingale, Henry VIII to Martin Luther King, and so forth. Biafra War, Nigeria to, the Tudors and the Romans. It should just be history, and every minority should be reflected in that history. So that's my opinion about Black History Month. It's great that companies like ourselves and other companies are doing these amazing events, but it should be on an everyday basis, not just in October.
Yeah, I have a sort of similar views about Black history myself. To me, it's changed, especially this year. It used to be a time of reflection when I was always growing up, because that's what Black History Month used to be. It used to be a time where you sort of, in the media or just in general in your home, you sort of look back at some of the historical figures to do from where you're from, which is Congo, and as well as mainly American Black history as well. So it was always a time of reflection. But for me this year, it's changed. I want Black history to be a time to look forward. And it goes in line with what everybody's talking about, how Black history isn't just the month of October, it's almost every day. And with that in mind, there are people who are working every day, making Black history every day, inspiring, helping, facilitating, literally creating Black history today as we speak. So that's what Black history has turned into for me and what it used to be.
I think for me, Mary said it, Black history often seems to be Americanized. And I think there's probably not enough done about British Black history, and in particular the slave trade and the role that Britain played in it. And obviously there was a lot done around the events that happened in Bristol. I suppose the other thing for me is I don't remember it from school. I went to a Catholic school in South London. We didn't do Black History Month. This was in the late 90s, early 2000s. So I'm looking at primary schools at the moment for my daughter, and it'll be fascinating to see what do they do for Black History Month, and what gets taught and what is part of the history curriculum. As Mary was saying, is it still very traditional kind of British history, or has it evolved? Has it changed? And those are the sort of questions that I'll be asking when I'm looking at schools for my daughter.
I agree. I think with Black History Month, my only problem is that I'd never want it to be a theme, because it's not a theme. It's not like, racism and the culture doesn't stop just because it's the end of October. But then saying that, I think that while we do have the spotlight and in schools and in workplaces, I think it's important to try and reclaim the narrative, because a lot of people's education on Black history has a lot of missing gaps, and there's so many key historical figures that people don't know about that should be being learned about and celebrated alongside those of other races and cultures. So although I agree and think that it should be just a part of the school curriculum, while we have the spotlight for Black History Month, it is good for us to use it as an opportunity to fill in those missing gaps in our knowledge.
I'd agree with Alice on that point. And as a journalist and as an editor, Black History Month is a good and positive thing, because it allows us to organise our newsrooms behind something, to tell stories, to get our audience interested into something, because the rest of the media is covering as well, and it's trending, and it gives us a way to introduce an audience to it. And I think we shouldn't overlook that. Whereas perhaps sometimes that's harder if you're trying to do that by yourself as a news organisation in the middle of March, for example. Whereas because Black History Month has become a news event, it's become an advertising event essentially. And I don't know how the panel feel about that. And the same with kind of the events that have happened this year. It kind of felt like a lot of organisations are kind of dad dancing around it and trying to piggyback on things. And how do you feel about that? I don't know.
What I don't like is, so obviously Black men and women have been murdered for hundreds of years now, and so obviously George Floyd heightened the Black Lives Matter movement, and then you had all these companies coming out going, we stand by Black Lives Matter, when in the same breath I know a journalist who was called the N-word in the newsroom, and she spoke to HR and HR didn't do anything about it, and she was constantly crying in the toilet. Those same companies who have got a whiteboard, who haven't got any employees of colour in their newsrooms or offices, are the same ones jumping a bandwagon saying we stand with Black Lives Matter. Well, no, you don't, because if that was the case, your office would reflect London as a diverse city. And so for me, it's not about lip service. It's about putting money where your mouth is, donate to Black organisations and grassroots who are trying to promote Black history, trying to get clicks and change, or trying to educate people on a general basis. And that's what I don't like. I don't want people just to do Black History Month and then not want to, and then the next October 2021, it's just a bandwagon, what Ed said. People are just there for the month, and then once the October 31st passes, November 1st hits, people are going back to closing their eyes and not caring about Black people as a whole. Because while history is important, there are current issues that are going on right now. Last night, you know, the Stars of Nigeria, they opened fire on peaceful protests in Lagos. I've watched in my own eyes. I've seen people being killed. I've seen people digging out bullets out of their bodies. You know, The Guardian was the first publication to cover it about 4 days ago. The Sky News covered it. Even Standard covered it. I haven't seen any national newspaper covering it apart from those three. And this is Hillary Clinton tweeted last night saying, "Guys, this is ridiculous. You know, please do not shoot these innocent protesters." You know, and still that this is an important issue. This is the past and present. And yet it's about making sure that we have the right people in the company and the team, the news team, to really shine a light on these stories. It's not about the past, it's the present. So Black History Month is past and present and the future. And it's so important that all of us as a whole, no matter if you're white, Indian, Arabic, wherever colour you've come from, you're part of the dialogue. We can all be allies and help shape the curriculum to make sure the young generation grow up knowing what is history. Not just white history, not Black history, history in general.
Okay, cool. Well, I'm going to go on to the next question now. So thanks for that, guys. That was really interesting. So sort of going back to your childhood and growing up, what education did you receive on Black history? And this may have been school, from your parents or from your peers. Really interested to find out exactly, how you learned about it.
Can I answer this one? I remember when I was young, I had there was no Black history education in school at all. And I'm mixed race and grew up in an area that was quite racist when I was younger. So I think most of my education actually came from racism and things that were happening to like me and my mum. And I think that's like a really sad way to learn about it. And I remember like raising things in school, and it wasn't really, it was like it didn't exist. I just thought it was people being mean. And then you get older and you learn a bit more. And then you realize that it's got a name and it's racism. And then I had all these questions myself that I wanted answering because I didn't understand it. And then I think when I got a bit older, I started researching it, just asking my friends, going online and things like that. And I got so into it that it even affected like my choice of university, because I did English at uni, but I chose a uni that I could study Black history through music on the course. So it was really important to me, but it just seems like, looking back, it seems crazy that not in primary school, because I'm 27 now, so I was in high school in 2004, I think, into 2009, and there was just nothing at all that I could learn, not in college or anything. And I think that's really quite sad. So I think like working in the newspaper, it's important to, like the others have said, like the education isn't always about going back and learning facts and figures and things like that. Like history is being made now. And I work in Manchester with Rami, and there's so many amazing stories from people now making Black history now. And I personally don't think they get enough coverage. And I think that's a shame. I think that there's all different types of education we should be exploring, and like covering issues that are going on now is important, and we have the chance to do that. So we should do it even more.
I was quite lucky. So I grew up in Bristol. So I was quite lucky that my parents came here in the Windrush generation, but they were very, very aware that once they started having children, because I went to school, as I said, in the 70s, there was nothing. So bearing in mind, I grew up in Bristol. Bristol was built by slaves. I did history O-level in school, but learned about canals and things like that in history. So my parents quite quickly realized that they would have to teach me about Black history. So as I said, we had books, we had lots of books. I remember when I wanted to go to secondary school, I asked if I could go to Colston School. My mum said no. And I said, why not? And she sat and explained to me why not. So I was quite lucky. It wasn't in schools. I didn't learn it from my friends, but my parents were very, very aware that they had to teach us where we came from, what happened, what would happen when I went to school, what would happen when I went to work. as I said before, all my dolls looked like me. So, you know, when I came home and said people called me names, my parents were very good and sat me down and explained that I should be proud of what I look like, the colour of my skin. So Black History Month wasn't around, but I had Black history in my house. And then, you know, luckily I carried that through when I had my children. When my daughter came home, exactly the same at 11, all her friends were going to Colston's. Can I go there, Mum? No. I explained to her why. She understood. It wasn't somewhere where you could go. So that was my little bit of my history that I've sort of imparted onto my children. So quite lucky in some respects for me.
Yeah, me myself, I've just come out of like official education because I finished university last year, and I can't really remember a time where Black history was like a focal point or was like was specifically focused on more than anything. I did A-level history myself, and we did the American Civil Rights a little bit then, but even then it was a small module, and a lot of stuff that was taught I'd already found out myself through my own research. So growing up, I sort of had to find Black history by myself. My parents don't really speak too much about history back home in Congo. They'll speak about their experiences and personal stuff and tell me about aunties and grandmas and uncles and brothers and sisters. But in terms of Congolese history itself, they never told me about that stuff because it's quite harrowing. And when I did look into it myself, I realized why. Obviously, you know, Belgian connection, King Leopold, and stuff like that. So a lot of the stuff I had to find myself. I had a lot of peers as well. I had a lot of friends who were Somali. They told me about Somali history. Obviously, you know, I had Cameroonian friends, Nigerian friends, and Zimbabwean friends, and so that's where I sort of learned a bit about my Black history and then Black history in general, and then obviously the Windrush generation when it came to the fore into the media, which is I was quite embarrassed. That was the first time I sort of found out about the Windrush generation when the deportation debacle came about. I was quite embarrassed that it took me that long to find out about it, but then you also think, how can, you know, a 22-year-old Black man from England not know about the Windrush generation? It was quite astounding, really. But for me as well, I sort of had to the search for Black history myself and how to research it myself is because I was finding out how to sort of relate to the history that was being taught to me. I was a big reader. I loved English, and you can give me Shakespeare and I can read Streetcar and Of Mice and Men, you know, until, you know, to all my heart's desire. But at the end of the day, those stories and those people didn't relate to me. So that really sort of sparks my own search for Black history. And I wanted to look for Black writers. And then from there, when I found out about Marley Blackman and Ralph Ellison and stuff like that, that's when, you know, it prompted me to go and search my own Black history and find it myself. So my relationship with Black history has always been sort of insular. It's always been sort of me finding it myself more than anything.
I think what's been really interesting that everyone spoke about here is that Black history is the past, the present, and the future, and it should be continuously a conversation, not just set in this month, but going forward. And Alistair, a point that you made there is racism being in the form of education. And that kind of brings me on to my next question, which is around the Black Lives Matter movement. And this happened after a tragic event, and it's raised awareness for Black history and the issues that Black people face on a daily basis. How do you continuously educate yourself on Black history and these issues that arise and have these conversations with other people? To anyone who wants to go first.
Mine go first. I think I read a lot. I watch a lot of documentaries. So I'm always trying to educate myself and always have done. I think the conversation. So I remember when, because I work for the regional business now, the regional business is probably the least diverse part of the business. So in the senior team, it's me. And in the teams trickling down, there's probably 4 or 5 people of colour. So I remember when it hit the news with George Floyd, people that I'd worked with for 20 years avoided conversations with me. I tried to open a dialogue, but people were frightened to speak to me because they thought they would upset me, which is which is the worst thing to do. So I remember sending an email out to everybody in my contact list that I worked with that was white and said, please reach out. And I think for me, it's about reaching out. There is no question that's a stupid question. If you're uncomfortable with words and phrases, let me know. And I've said to some of my colleagues, if you hear a comment, this is everybody's problem. It's not just my problem because I'm black, it's your problem as well. So I think it's about, if we hear or see something going on, everybody needs to speak up, not just that black person that's in the corner by themselves. It's everybody. You know, if you're in the boardroom and somebody makes a comment, please speak up. So I think for me, it's opened a dialogue with my colleagues. We've never had it before because, you know, they don't want to upset Tracy because they don't want to mention they don't want to call me black because that's offensive. Well, it's not. It's not offensive. I am black, and I'm proud of it. So it's just about, for me, ongoing dialogues. If you see something on the TV and you think it's uncomfortable and you want to have a conversation with me about it, feel free, because I'm happy to do that. So that's what it's done for me, I think, over the last few months.
I agree with Tracy, but I also think that it's not like, while having open conversations is really important with black people and people of other races, I just think it's not black people's responsibility to teach you about racism. There's so many ways that you can learn for free as well. Like, I listen to so many podcasts, and there's so many articles that you can read, like by black men and women, and I think that the responsibility is on you. You know, don't look for someone else to teach you. Like, you find the answers yourself.
I think for me, it's you know, it's not second nature. So I often find there's sort of historical figures referred to, or kind of incidents referred to, and I will have I'm ashamed to admit it, but I have no sort of concept of what that is. So I'm trying to make a point of, if I do hear something that I don't understand, is go away and research it, because that then allows you to have meaningful conversations. Whereas if you just sit there and someone says something incident and you just kind of nod as if you know what it is, you know, if you don't know what it is, Google's the greatest encyclopedia that's ever been invented. It's important that you sort of challenge yourself and go outside of your traditional kind of comfort and research zone. And sometimes, as Rami was saying, it can be quite uncomfortable going to read some of those things, and does make you reflect on what's happened in the past, which I think is a positive thing. The other thing as well is kind of watching and consuming things you wouldn't normally watch, and it's fascinating. There was that Samuel L. Jackson documentary Enslaved that was on the other week, and that was really good. And that, for me, I learned a lot through that I didn't know. It was kind of, everyone sort of knew Britain was involved in the slave trade, but they didn't know that many details about it. And I thought that show sort of, it was very accessible, and it was a way that everyone could access that information. Admittedly, with that weird kind of game show diving bit they did in between. But I thought, you know, to have someone of that prominence doing a documentary like that on the BBC and them giving the space for that, I think that's a really positive thing, and brings it to a much wider audience.
Yeah, I totally agree, following what everyone said, what Ed said as well, that even if you don't know about certain stuff, the internet is free. There's no excuses, really, not to be ignorant. And Sky have loads of documentaries at the moment, you know, from, you know, historic figures, Martin Luther King, to you know, the four young girls called the four little girls who were killed by the KKK in church, to, you know, the first black tennis player, Anthea. There's a whole array of documentaries that are on Sky right now, or you can download on Boost iPlayer and so forth. And also loads of books. And again, if you're not sure about something, you can Google it. There's so many book lists flying around, and so many activist groups on Twitter and Instagram. You know, Black History Walks, they're amazing. They literally, you meet up some in London for an hour and a half, and they go through Black History with you. Even in Brighton, Brighton have a massive Black History movement. with Black History Brighton, where they go around different buildings and showing you who was born here, who built this, and so forth. So really, I think everyone should. I'm still learning myself. Like, you know, I don't know everything. Yeah, I know a lot of stuff, but I can't know everything. And I watch a lot of documentaries, and I engage with people on social media, and have honest conversations with my friends of different races. I'm always sharing content, and always people. I love people coming to me and asking me questions. To an extent, where it's not exhausting, because like I said, the internet's free, and you know, if you want to find out something, do it yourself. But if people generally have a question, I'm happy to answer that question. Oh, how do you feel about this, Mary? This picture, I'm not sure. This headline, I'm not sure. Do you think it's, you know, on a border of, you know, reinforced an angry Black woman stereotype, or is it a bit, you know, decisive? You know, I'm happy to help. We're all in this company together, and if people are not sure, I'd rather someone come to me than publish something and get it wrong, you know. And so yeah, I'm also educating myself. I love sharing information, so books, debates, Black culture archives. I do them. Black women in Britain exhibition. It's amazing, about all these amazing women who've done, you know, incredible things that have been forgotten about. So yeah, no excuse really. So we all owe it to ourselves to educate ourselves, and internet's free. So here you go.
Great. So I'm going to move on to the next question, and it's all about the different generations. So how do you guys sort of approach Black history or the Black Lives Matter movement, and sort of educate those future generations as well as the older generations about those things?
I go again? You go.
No, go ahead.
You go.
It's fine. It's fine.
No, you go. You first.
Yeah. I think so. These conversations, from my point of view and from my experience, I think the older generation sort of get it, and especially uncles, older brothers, and especially my mum and dad as well. They've lived through these sort of moments in time. They've seen it all before, and they know all about it. They know what the Black Lives Matter movement are fighting for, and they know what the discourse needs to be. I think the question should be more geared towards the younger generation, because this is new to them. A lot of the things that they're experiencing is a culmination of things that they have gone through throughout their whole life, lived experiences that they've been trying to sort of make sense of. And what we see with these protests and these outcries and social media activism is that exploding in a sense. And I think it's a bit more different this time, because the young kids, because they have so much power in their hands with the tablets that they're holding, and because they can enact so much change and so much influence that they have as well. I think the conversation needs to be about sort of gearing that energy towards the right places. Yes, you want to fight for Black people to be, you know, viewed and seen as people, and we're fighting for our rights and stuff like that. But where can you enact that change? Where's the right places to be? Which is what I've been trying to, whenever I speak to younger people, whenever I go, I'm out and about in interviews, and they say, you're a journalist, like, yes, you work for the Evening News. I'm like, yes. And I don't tell them, so can you, because they see that as corny and a bit weird, but I just tell them, listen, in a sense, I do. You can do this too. You can come out here. You can write these stories about people from these sort of communities. You can cover Black Lives Matter protests too, and you can educate people about movements as well. And you don't have to just do it from your room and on your laptop and TikTok stuff. That you can get out there and go to institutions like Reach and national newspapers and the BBCs and the ITVs, and apply yourself and arm yourself with the tools, not just from your home, but with skills as well.
I just wanted to, I'll just be very brief, because you've sort of said most of what I would have said. But I just think for the younger generation, so my children, I've addressed it with my children. I think it's just about passing down to the younger generation and what I've learned. They're in their 20s now, my kids, and they've experienced quite a lot of racism going into work, going into uni, things like that. So I think it's just about giving them the information that I had, and luckily I got a lot of information from my parents, and just teaching them how to deal with it, talking to nieces and nephews, you know, when they come home, just sitting down with them, you know, reading books to them, making them watch certain programs, giving them information about really strong Black people. This is what we can do. It's not all negative, because if you look at the news, you know, the negative stories that are on Black people, and just show them the positive side. So I think it is for us to pass it down through the generations. You know, my son left the job in Bristol because of representation. You know, 250 members of staff, he was the only Black person, and all they used to say to him is, haven't you got lovely hair? You know, he went to university for 4 years to study to be an accountant, and all they talked about was his hair. So, you know, he's experienced that at a very young age, and I think it's for us now just to keep passing things down, talking to them, and they'll get it. They'll get it themselves because they're living it right now. So, yeah.
I just think about approaching the conversations with different types of people. Like before I was a writer, I used to teach, and I found like children, I never found children the problem. I think children are quite receptive to new ideas and quite understanding, and they see things as black and white, like you just treat everybody nicely usually. But with older people, obviously being mixed race, I have Black and white people in my family, and there's been like several times where my white grandparents, you know, there's just an odd comment or something, and obviously they don't really know any, because they think that's just normal for them to say, you know, maybe back in the day. But I always find that a calm approach is always the best for everything, you know, kind of like, oh, you know, we don't actually say that anymore, and I'm like, that is, you know, you can't say that. And usually like going in calm rather than you know, really confrontational and really like, no, that's not on. You know, a lot of people don't understand, and obviously I think I take for granted sometimes being around so many different races young, but like say for my nan, for example, like she's probably just had white people around her whole life. So when she says something, it's not always coming from a place of ill intent. It's that's what she's used to, and then me starting a conversation and saying, you know, you can't say that, and here, you know, that here's why you can't say that. That upsets me because blah blah blah. And that I just think the calm approach is the best approach to start the conversation and to start teaching. And it doesn't matter what age as well. Not, you know, I don't like the excuse where, oh, they're from a different time, you know, let them go. It's fine. They're not going to change. But it's not about trying to convert people. It's just opening up the communication and just sharing how you feel about it. Because I'm sure my nan wouldn't say things if I'm saying, oh, you know, that doesn't sit well with me, I don't like that. And then she'll be like, why, you know, and then she learns something and then doesn't repeat it to her friends. So I think that's a good way to speak to, like, if you've got elderly white parents and that are similar to like my grandparents.
I do think it can be exhausting. Oh, sorry, did I jump in? No, it can be exhausting in terms of having this conversation, different type of generation and so forth. It's just, I think, like, for example, my sister was in Sainsbury's and she was called the N-word. A two-year-old boy called the N-word, and his sister, who was 4 or 5, she gasped because she knew that word was obviously a bad word. And my sister had two choices: either to walk away and be angry, or actually confront the woman and approach her and be like, "Did you hear what your son said?" So she decided to confront the woman, and the woman got defensive. Said, "Oh, it's not my son; it's my nephew and niece." My sister said, "But did you hear what he said?" The fact that your niece reacts in that way, she knows at a young age that word is bad. She knows that we shouldn't use that word. So where has your nephew got it from? And again, you know, the woman got defensive, saying, "Well, I don't know, it must be at school." But obviously, again, having a conversation with someone who apparently wasn't her kid, she got so defensive. So sometimes, as a Black person, you are too exhausted. It's too traumatic having a conversation with people from the old generation, from young generation, to people, to your peers. They don't get it. They have no empathy. They don't understand, or it's just nothing comes from it. You know, you can stand and educate someone, but it's up to them to listen and then walk away and think, you know what, let me try and. So, example, there's a book called Me and White Supremacy by, I can't remember her surname, Layla Hussein, I think. And the whole point of the book is to confront discrimination and racism and so forth. And so it's for obviously people who are non-Black, and she, after every chapter, there's an activity, and she encourages people to be really honest and dig deep in themselves. If you see a Black person or Black man on a street wearing a hood, as a white person or elderly person, would you clutch your bag? You know, that kind of conversation. And so it's a great way. So at the end of the book, the person who reads it is kind of like a journey, because by the end of the book, they think, wow, I've actually confronted certain biases I had or discrimination thoughts that I had, and so forth. And they can go away and then share with their family and friends and go on a journey to become anti-racist. And that's a great book to read. I think I recommend that for everyone, you know, to read it, just to understand the certain issues that affect the Black community. And so, yeah, so I do think it's important to confront and have conversations with generations, but also understand that it's exhausting, traumatic, and sometimes nothing can come from it. And then you walk away upset, angry, demoralized, demotivated, and just exhausted. And that person continues their life happy-go-lucky, not without care in the world.
I think your exhaustion point, Mary, is a really good one. And it also is. It's often quite unsettling to challenge, an elderly relative or any other relative sometimes, because you're in a family setting. You're in a place where you think, oh God, if I say something now, then it's all gonna kick off. But it is important to do that, or to find the right setting to have those conversations. And just to touch on the younger generations, my daughter has a Black doll, and that's great. She has 3 dolls, and one of them is a Black doll, and she plays with them equally. She treats them all equally, and I just hope that's, and as Alice was saying, kids almost show you the way it should be. They just see people for who they are, rather than thinking about race or cultures or anything else. They just see people in that kind of more simplistic sense. And that's quite nice. I think it's just going to be fascinating as she starts going, through education. What education is like now? Is it more inclusive? Do they learn more about different cultures and different faiths? And I don't know. It's the honest answer until she starts that journey. And I think it's because it's so different across the country as well. I'm in the north of England. I'm sure there's very different experiences in different parts of England, Scotland, Ireland, and Wales as well.
Thanks, everyone. Whilst we're on the topic of addressing difficult conversations, I'm going to read out a question from Jakub that's been left in the comments. It's really difficult to navigate comments at the moment. It can be a very depressing experience to scroll through comments on some of our Facebook accounts. Our social teams do their best to sometimes struggle to moderate due to no offense comments. Does anyone on the panel have thoughts about how we challenge this and what could be done differently? And Mary, I'm going to hand this one over to you, as you're a social media.
I totally agree. It's a hard one, because any story on Meghan Markle and Harry, it doesn't matter what the story is. If Harry is the lead person in the story and Meghan Markle, but it's the comments are disgusting. And I've stopped reading them because it's no point reading them, because I'm sitting there angry, want to reply back to them, disgusted by people can actually sit there and say the stuff they do. It's just keyboard warriors, it's trolls, and those stories are gonna generate the racism. You know that. And so as we don't actually moderate the comments ourselves, we can flag it up to the moderation team. But I do agree that there has to be a better system in at Mail Online. I know they ban guys to be a freelance moderator there, and we have to ban people. So people try and use racist terms from 1930s, and cause it's a young team, and they think that people don't know what it is, but you just know. And we'll ban them, and then we'll give them reasons why they're banned. But then sometimes they'll come back under a different email address, like a Yahoo account or Hotmail account. But as a moderator, you kind of know by the tone of their voice and the way they write, it's the same person. So it's banned and given their reasons, sexism, discrimination, racism, and so forth. At Reach, because I don't really work with the moderation team, I don't know, how there's a way we can really improve, because the comments is disgusting. And if someone reads the story and sees comments, it can put them off from buying newspapers or going on a website, or advertisers can be put off. I don't know, but I do agree there has to be a way, because it's demoralizing, especially when they are talking about someone who, you know, is your race. Like Meghan Markle obviously is half black, but people see her as black, so obviously people are going to be, you know, say all races and say discriminative things. So I do think there has to be a system. I don't know what it could be. I'm eager to, you know, I'm happy or eager to try to get something in place, or work with the moderation team, or just something, have a result. But it is demoralizing seeing those comments time and time again. In the 8-hour shift, I see like, oh, it's just thousands. It's not nice at all. Yeah.
I think this is a really big issue for our brands, and it was really highlighted in the summer in particular as well, around the Black Lives Matter protests. There's a couple of issues with it. The first one is Facebook itself. We don't have same moderation tools for our Facebook pages as we do for Facebook groups, and it's Facebook where we get a lot of those comments. And we really need Facebook to give us much better moderation tools, or the ability to turn off comments or pause comments on certain stories. We have that kind of technology and capability on our own sites, which we're able to use. We've recently moved to a new comments platform, and we have seen much better comments coming through on our own platforms now because of the moderation tools that we have. And I do think it's a real challenge for our teams, and I think it's a real challenge as well for for white journalists having to moderate these threads. It can be very, very difficult sometimes to understand all the terminology, to understand all of the nuances and the things that are in there. So I absolutely take Mary's point. It's absolutely exhausting, and we need the platforms to work with us, as well as doing more things on our side as well.
Thanks, guys. So just moving on to the next question. How would you advise your 18-year-old self on how to handle potentially prejudiced or racist treatment against you? So it could be something you sense rather than something you can actually prove. And does that advice differ from any similar situations that you've faced?
I'll speak. How would I advise my 18-year-old self? I think, when I was 18, growing up in Bristol, I didn't suffer a lot of racism because I came from quite a diverse part of Bristol until I went to work. And that's where I suffered racism in the workplace. And I was quite vocal, I think, and always have been throughout my career in, things that have gone wrong. So I don't think I would change anything. I just think that instead of, back then, I think I probably got angry and thought, why would people not want to employ me because my skin's darker than theirs? I probably came across as quite angry and aggressive, and, that wasn't great. But I think in hindsight, I'd be a lot calmer in the way I approach things. And if I've advised my children, pick your battles, but be calm and very collected in how you get your point across, and don't be angry with it. So I don't think I'd change a lot. I was never good at being quiet anyway. If things were wrong, they were always wrong. But it is exhausting. It is exhausting because my parents came here in the Windrush, and they assumed things would be different for me. They're not. And I thought things would be different for my children. They're not. So some days I feel exhausted. I'm tired. I think, is this going to carry on in each generation? It doesn't seem to be getting any better. But I think if we just keep fighting the way we fight, and, talking and educating, and this is great because this educates a lot of people, then hopefully one day, not in my lifetime, I know, but hopefully one day it will be different. So yeah, so that's me.
Yeah, I'd tell my 18-year-old self to stand up for himself a bit more. I grew up in a predominantly white town. It's called Leeds, just outside of here. I think for a majority of my time in school, I was the only Black child in every single sort of situation I was in, every room, every building, even sometimes a shopping center, I was the only Black child there. So with that comes a sense of loneliness, and you're sort of by yourself. So when something does happen, even, I think Jenny, you were leading to something that's a little bit more covert, so like microaggressions. But even when something overt happened, there was no chance for me to sort of fight that, or there was no help next to me, because the friends that I did have who turned out to be racist themselves wouldn't help me. The elders around me wouldn't help me, because to them there was nothing wrong with this Black lad being tormented, being bullied, or being called a name that, it's just the name stuff. So I tell myself to sort of stick up for myself a bit more, and just to tell myself that you're not the only person going through this. There was a whole host of people out there in a similar position as you, and you have the internet at your disposal. So, look out for them, speak out, reach out, tell your mom and dad that, today somebody called you a blackie, or somebody told you to take off the England top because you shouldn't be wearing one. Just speak out a lot more, because you're not going through it yourself. Be a little bit more brave. Just have a bit more metal about yourself, and because at the end of the day, you're the one's going to come out better for it rather than them. So,
I also think it's important to for non-Black people to understand, recognize the covert and overt racism, because I think some people just think, being called a monkey or the N-word or go back to where you come from. Yeah, they're the usual tracks that you get on a daily basis, but there are so many other microaggressions that you get with an improvement process in every sector, of our life. And I think we do need more allies. So if you might feel uncomfortable, I don't know how it works with HR complaint system, because I have no idea how it works. But if you witness someone being mistreated or being overlooked or having their ideas shut down, if a journalist is constantly pitching Black stories or stories that affect her community and it's being shut down by an editor, but another person who's white might pitch something similar and that gets approved, is that, obviously that could be seen as, personal. Or if you've back the journalist who I know who was called the N-word in the newsroom, she confronted HR and not one person stood up for herself. She felt lonely in the toilet, constantly crying because she felt alone. So having a colleague who says, look, that's not right, or oh my gosh, I heard that, I'm going to HR, I'm going to speak to the editor, or the CEO, or so forth. Having allies is so important. As you don't feel, as I say, you feel less alone. Because sometimes we walk into the office or newsroom and you are one of 5 Black journalists, or you are the one Black journalist among hundreds of white people. You do feel lonely. You do feel like, you're not out of place, but you feel like, I'm vocal, so I will obviously, say something, but not everyone is vocal, and some people feel they might get sacked or demoted or not promoted for a position because they spoke out. So we do need allies and people to support us and recognise that no, that is wrong. That's covert racism, that's overt racism, discrimination. That person is the best person at that job. They should be promoted or they should be higher in that position. So I think we should need everyone to kind of just support one another, have everyone's back, and not be afraid to approach the editor or the CEO or the manager or HR and say, look, conventionally, I witnessed something that's not right. Is there anything you can do about it? And I'm happy to put my name down and so forth. So I don't know how HR works in the complaint system, but that'd be something to look at, and maybe people can be comfortable to approach HR conventionally and know that they won't get sacked or dismissed because they backed up that person in the situation. I think, it's something to look at.
And I think we've had a few comments within today's panel that actually agree with that point, Mary. It's not completely on Black people or people of colour to step in for themselves. It should be everyone talking about this and everyone being an ally and stepping in to make that safe environment so people can come forward and say, actually, I don't feel safe right now, and the system in place will follow so that people do feel safe. So thank you to those who have raised that point. It's absolutely right. And we've had loads of other questions submitted, but unfortunately, because of time, we're going to get the panelists to answer it after and post it on the Buzz page. But for now, I want to ask the panelists, what would you want one takeaway to be from this panel for people to take away from today?
I think for something simple, just that Black History Month isn't for Black people to celebrate and non-Black people to be schooled on. Like, we're all learning together and we should all be celebrating together.
Yeah, for me, it's the case that we are in your newsrooms, we are your workmates, and we're open for conversation. I will speak to anybody, nothing's off the table. And yeah, that's the takeaway that I want people to take with us.
Yeah, I agree with Rami. Like I said, you know, I'm always open to conversation. Like I said, I'm not here to educate people on every single thing, but I'm happy to answer questions, answer concerns. If you're writing a story, you're not sure about the angle, you're not sure if it's could be seen in a bad light, you're not sure about just anything basic. I'm always, you know, available via GChat, Slack, or just, you know, I'm open because I believe we've got to be to change honestly, and I think Reach is making changes, but got a long way to go in terms of, you know, editorially and recruitment-wise and so forth, and how our stance in the public and how we're seen as tabloid newspapers and stuff we cover, the employer and so forth. So I want people to go away knowing that they can come to us. They can come to us and say, you know, I'm not sure about this, but also to have the courage and to be an ally and to call out stuff that's not right and to approach HR and say, look, you know, please help me. My colleague's upset about a comment or so forth. So it's a safe space for everyone to work in.
Yeah, I sort of echo what Mary has just said, but I think just for me, the one thing and what I've learned over the last sort of 3 or 4 months, which I've never had before, is we need to stand up for each other. We need to be together. So it's not my problem. It's not your problem, it's our problem. So if you hear something, you see something and you know it's not right, don't put your head down, speak out, and let that person of colour, who may be the only one there, feel that they've got somebody on their side. So yeah, let's have a joined up approach.
I think for me, I've learned there's a huge amount of resources out there for people to discover Black history, but that's no good just kind of reading things or consuming things. You then need to go and talk about it, be that to your peers, or I think I would now feel quite comfortable talking to someone on this panel about something that I've seen or I've read. And I think that's the more we talk about it, the more we break down those barriers and people feel more comfortable. And I think people will then support each other more and be more open and be more inclusive.
Thank you so much, everyone. I think it's so important to call out any behaviours that you see are negative towards someone else, and reach out to HR and make sure that we are working towards a safer environment. And that's why we're here today. That's why we're having these conversations. And I want to thank everyone who's come to watch today. I can't see everyone, which is a very different experience for me, but thank you for those who have been commenting as we've gone along. There's a few questions that we have had to skip because of time, but we will be addressing those. And I'm sure that there's a lot of takeaways that you've had from these sessions today. So I hope you've found it as educational and interesting as I have. It is recorded, so anyone who's missed this will be posted on Buzz. I'm going to hand over to Jaina to round up some of our D&I roles that we're advertising at the moment.
Thanks, Emma. Thanks so much to everyone for joining the panel today. The Diversity, Inclusion and Belonging Network, we have 6 people in the committee at the moment, but we are looking for more. So really keen to get more volunteers on board. At the moment, we're looking for an admin support role, an event support role and an educational support role. So if you're out there and you're listening to this and you think it's something you'd love to be part of, then please just drop us a line at dib@reachplc.com, just with your name and interest in the role, and we'll get back to you about next steps. But thanks all so much, and enjoy the rest of your day.
Thank you.